Good morning, everybody. Good morning. I'm Max Richmond. I'm the president of the National Committee to Preserve Social Security and Medicare, the second largest, very active senior citizen association. I want to thank our friends who are always there and come to our rallies and meetings. I thank you all for coming. I've got a long speech, but I'm not going to give it because we have members here who are going into their caucus. We didn't know that was going to be set at the same time as this briefing. But let me just say that we are very happy to be here with you, with the members of Congress that are participating. We are delivering right now 100,000 letters from our members to members of Congress, urging them to protect Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid in these debt and deficit reduction costs. These are from real people, and we want members of Congress to know that there are real people behind all the theories and inside the Beltway discussions and acronyms. These are real people with real concerns, real problems, and real struggles. And we'd like them to, the members of Congress, to keep that in mind as they debate the future of Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. I want to introduce first a great friend of seniors, a great friend of the National Committee, the current Vice Chair of the Democratic Caucus, Javier Becerra from California.
To Max and all those from the National Committee who have fought for years to not only protect and promote and preserve Social Security and Medicare, but have actually provided great service in informing seniors throughout America about the value of Social Security and Medicare. We say thank you so much, and we look forward to working with you because we've got lots to do. Now, to me, the issue of Social Security especially is simple. As the, what was his designated as the commander in explaining stuff, Bill Clinton said, it really is simple math. And with Social Security, it is simple math. And so I'm going to tell you how simple it is in a second, because I think all of us who have had the privilege of getting elected to Congress realize how important it is, as simple as the math is. And I'm pleased that joining us today will be several members of Congress, including some new champions that we have. And one of those, of course, is going to be Steve Horsford. Stephen Horsford is a new member from the great state of Nevada who is going to make us extremely proud. He has served his state so well in the state legislature, but now we're fortunate to have stolen him away from the state legislature, and he's going to be with us in Congress. And I am thrilled to have someone of the caliber of Stephen Horsford joining us in Congress to help us in this fight. And he is going to be able to tell you exactly the same thing as we move through this process. 77 years, that's the first number. That's how long we've had Social Security, right? 77 years. 13 is the next number. 13, sometimes a bad number. Well, in this case, 13 recessions in those 77 years that America and Americans have had to weather. 13 recessions. In 77 years and through 13 recessions, how many times has Social Security failed to pay in full, on time, to every single American who earned his or her Social Security benefits? The next number is 0. Because never once has Social Security in 77 plus years, and weathering 13 recessions and some really bad ones like this past one, has Social Security ever failed to pay on time, in full, the benefits that Americans have earned by working for this great nation. What's important about that? Well, the next number, 14 trillion. What does 14 trillion have to do with anything? That's how much you and I and our forefathers and mothers have contributed to Social Security in 77 years. More than $14 trillion. That's taxpayer money, hard cash from our paychecks. Next number, 13 trillion. That's how much we have paid out to those who earn those benefits. Now, as Bill Clinton would tell you, if you could do your simple math, 14 minus 13 gives you a number. It gives you 1. 1 trillion that has never been spent of the hard cash contributed by Americans to the Social Security system. So every time you hear someone say to you, Social Security is about to go broke, you tell them, wait a minute, Where's my hard cash that I've been contributing to the tune of $1 trillion? But wait, it gets better. The next number, 1.6 trillion. What's 1.6 trillion? That's how much interest has been earned on the money that we've been depositing into the Social Security Trust Fund for decades from that $14 trillion that we've been contributing. So you add the $1 trillion that's left over that has never been spent, plus the 1.6 trillion, a little bit more actually, in interest that's been earned, do the math. $2.6, $2.7 trillion is what today the Social Security system has in trust. The trust fund. Surplus. Never used. Next number, 56 million. That's how many Americans today depend on that Social Security program and the 2.6 trillion that's in the bank, in the trust fund. Anyone who wants to say that Social Security is about to go broke or is bankrupt better start talking to those 56 million Americans, many of whom are seniors who depend in the majority for their income on Social Security. Over 9 million Americans who are disabled who are receiving Social Security payments. Some 6 million Americans who are the widowers, the widows, or the children of a deceased American worker who rely on Social Security, including the vice presidential candidate on the Republican ticket who received Social Security benefits when he was growing up as a child. We got to recognize that it's not about numbers. It's about people at the end of the day. It just so happens that the numbers work for Social Security. But at the end of the day, Social Security is not about numbers. It is about people. And for more than 77 years, Social Security has made sure that people get to live in dignity because the numbers add up. That's what this is about. And so if there's any debate on Social Security, we need fighters. We need people who will stand up and not only talk about why Social Security has been so important to people, to Americans, but why the numbers defend Social Security and give us reason to strengthen Social Security, not to privatize it. And so I am thrilled to be here with you because the fight has just begun. They don't know what tenacious fighters we will be for a program that has made life dignified for so many Americans. And so I am ready to be with you. I've got my uniform on. You let me know. We're ready to fight. Thank you very much.
Let me just say, Congressman, let me say if former President Clinton declines becoming Secretary of Explaining Stuff, I hope you'll be nominated. You did a terrific job. Thank you. Thank you very much. Congressman Becerra referred to a newly elected member. I want to ask him to come up, Stephen Horsford. He came to our office. He met with me. He met with our staff a few months before the election. He filled out our questionnaire. He answered our questions in the interview. And his commitment to Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid was so obvious. We supported him in his election, and we're so glad you won and that you're here as an ally of senior citizens. Thank you. Thank you.
Good morning. First, thank you to Max. Thank you to the National Committee for your support, for your advocacy on behalf of all of our parents and grandparents who depend on Medicare, Social Security, and Medicaid. I just got off of a very hard-fought campaign running for a new open congressional district in the state of Nevada, the 4th congressional seat. It's 7 counties throughout Nevada. It's actually half the state of Nevada. And as I've talked to our constituents, they were very clear that we are here to represent their voice in protecting Medicare and Social Security as it exists today. And we will not balance the budget on the backs of our promise and commitments to our parents and our grandparents. These are programs that, as Congressman Becerra said, individuals have paid into, contributed to over their entire lives, and it needs to be in place for them when they most need it. For me, this is also personal. My grandmother, when I was 9 weeks old, had a stroke and was paralyzed on the left side of her body. When she came out of a coma, she required 24-hour medical care and lived in a nursing home for 27 years of her life until she passed away in 2000. If it were not for disability, if it were not for Medicaid, of which 60% of people who are on Medicare actually receive services in nursing homes through Medicaid funding, my grandmother would not have been able to live as long as she did. From the time I was a young boy until she passed, I visited my grandmother every week in a nursing home and several times in hospitals. And I know what bed sores look like. I know what good care looks like, and I know what substandard care looks like. You can tell it in the faces of the individuals when you see them. And so as Congressman Becerra said, this is not about numbers on a spreadsheet. It's about the lives of people who will be affected by the decisions that this Congress and our president make. And I am very focused on that enormous priority that we have. There are tough challenges that we face as a country, but we can do this, and we can do it in a way that is balanced and fair and does not break our promise to our parents and our grandparents. So I look forward to working with you, Max, and to all of the members of the National Committee. This is something, as Congressman said, we will fight for. We know what side we're here to fight for, and we know whose voices we're here to represent, and we will protect Medicare and Social Security with your support. So thank you very much.
I am so proud to introduce our next speaker, Congresswoman Rosa DeLauro, who has been a champion of seniors for many, many years. And I'm not going to say much more than that. I want to give you a chance to speak. I know you've got the caucus to go to. Please welcome Congresswoman DeLauro.
Good to see you. Good to see you. Thank you so much, and my apologies, Tammy. I'll be quick here, so I don't like to go in front of my colleagues here. But it's great to see all of you, and I want to thank you and thank everyone at the National Committee for inviting me and for hosting this this gathering here today. I think it's critical, but also I think what is so critically important for all of us today is standing up for what is the bedrock foundation of our social insurance system. That's what this is about. And it has been a system that has guaranteed economic security and health care for our seniors today. And I will just say this very clearly, why people would want to mess with that is sometimes beyond me. But I know I've got great colleagues who are engaged in this effort. I know Jan Schakowsky's been there, and Gwen Moore has been there, Steve and Tammy here with us this morning. You know, and I think that in re-electing the president last week, the American people spoke decisively about how they want us to move forward on the economy and on the budget. I don't think they could have been clearer. First of all, I believe they want us to put Americans back to work. That's first and foremost, to rebuild the economy for the future. But they want us to advance and to work at their needs and their challenges. And as part of that effort, it has to be about seniors and workers who have given a lifetime of hard work and who deserve a dignified retirement. That is what this is about, standing on the shoulders of a generation who made a difference. It's our turn now to make a difference for them in their retirement. They want us to be there for the middle class, and as a foundation of what that middle class is about and of working families are about, Social Security and Medicare. The letters from the National Committee coming from all over the country All these letters contain this position. 77 years, this is a program that really is the epitome, the embodiment of what our shared values have been all about. That is what Social Security is all about. Since 1935, it's tied generations together, which is what I think is its great strength. I have a 98-year-old mother about to be 99. This Social Security ties me to her, my kids to me, in a way that says we have the responsibility for one another and that we're not all on our own in this society. We need to move forward if we're thinking about what the budget is about and the deficit, what that's about. But it needs to be a balanced approach. It needs to be a constructive approach that focuses on growing the economy, rebuilding the middle class, creating jobs, and, yes, protecting seniors. A recent poll by the Democracy Corps and the Campaign for America's Future. 70% of Americans want to see the tax breaks for the wealthiest 2% ended, and 68% said that any plan that does not do this is unacceptable. Let's look at where we need to balance the budget before we move forward. 2-to-1, 62% to 31% Americans do not want to see any cuts to Social Security benefits. 4 out of 5 Americans, 79%, do not want to see their Medicare payments cut or capped. And as soon as the first Social Security check was issued, poverty amongst the elderly began to drop. In the 1950s, more than 30% of elderly Americans lived out their last years in poverty. Today, that figure is about 10%. 2 out of 3 seniors today relying on Social Security as the prime source of monthly income, including 3/4 of all elderly women. Gentlemen, I apologize to you, but we live longer. We live longer, and the quality of our lives as we get older is deteriorating. And we cannot allow that to happen. In short, Social Security, the most successful, efficient, middle-class retirement program in history. Rivaled by another foundational social insurance program, Medicare. Last 47 years, Medicare has succeeded in providing unprecedented health care security for our seniors. Before Medicare was signed, 51% of Americans 65 and older had health care coverage. Now virtually all Americans 65 and older enjoy health care coverage. In the meantime, the average life expectancy of Americans has risen by 8 full years. Medicare provides health care coverage for 12% of Americans, and another 17% are covered by Medicaid. Medicaid, it's additional support for about 20% of Medicare beneficiaries, about 9.4 million Americans. Nearly 40% of Medicaid spending goes to make sure that those dual eligibles have the care that they need. This includes services like long-term care and home health care. In short, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, these are programs that have transformed what it means to be old in this country. You know, I just spoke to a group of students from Connecticut. They don't, Social Security, Medicare, but, you know, what this institution has been able to do. I was trying to point out to them how this institution can make a difference in people's lives, which is wherein lies its great strength. And I pointed to Medicare and to Social Security, as well as a GI Bill and civil rights legislation and these other efforts that this institution is responsible for. That means we have the ability and the power to do something. These are tremendous, tremendous achievements, and those that we should be proud of. You know, Ronald Reagan said, and I quote, "Social Security has nothing to do with the deficit, nothing to do with the deficit. It's as true today as it was in 1980, and it's because the money goes into its own trust fund." So we should not be raiding these fundamental American programs to balance the budget and give tax breaks to the wealthiest people in this nation. There's a better way forward, and that is what the American people desire, as we have seen, and they have a right to demand that from all of us who serve here. So for me, and I know for you and for my colleagues who are here today, we're going to stand up for these programs. We need your help. You're there. All of our letters are there as well, and that is important, to galvanize that and to tell people to take their hands off Social Security and Medicare. Go to the tax cuts for the wealthiest people in this nation and the subsidies that we provide to those who don't need those subsidies. Thank you very, very much.
Aren't you glad she's on our team? Thank you so much, Congresswoman. About a little over 3 weeks ago, I flew out to Chicago to endorse a candidate running for the U.S. House of Representatives, and Tammy Duckworth. And there isn't anybody that I was prouder to, on behalf of our organization, to help bring to Congress. A hero to seniors, a hero to America. Tammy?
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Well, it's a real pleasure to be here, and I certainly would not be here without the help of the National Campaign to Preserve Social Security and Medicare. I'm going to leave this back in here. And also to see Congressman Moore, who's here, who was so kind to help me as well. And Max, thanks to everyone. You know, my district elected me to be their servant in Washington. And in the 18 months that I campaigned across my district, in a pretty contentious election, it got pretty nasty. A lot of outside money was spent against us. But in that entire time that I traveled the district, not once did anyone come up to me and say, Tammy, please get rid of Social Security. Not once did anyone come up to me and say, please get rid of Medicare. What I heard over and over and over again from the constituency in my district, both Republicans and Democrats and independents, was, Tammy, I live on a fixed income. Tammy, please preserve Social Security and Medicare's guarantee. I may not agree with you on defense spending. I may not agree with you on a number of issues. But not once did anyone ever come up to me and say, please get rid of it. And so those are my marching orders. This is what my constituency wants. They want me to place the preservation of the guarantees of Social Security and Medicare first and foremost in my list of priorities when I go sit down to balance the budget. And that is what I am going to do. I understand the importance of Social Security and Medicare in a very personal way that I think a lot of people may not. Yes, I have a mom who lives with me. She's 71, and she lives on her Social Security check, as well as a little bit of a government pension my dad left her. But the important part of my story is actually my father, who up until age 54 was fairly successful. He was a World War II vet, served in Vietnam, had us kids, used the GI Bill, lived the American dream, and built a very prosperous life, not a wealthy life, but a prosperous life for my family. And then at 55, he lost his job, and nobody would hire him because he had too much experience. And you know what that's code for. He was too old. And in the process of the next 5 years, my parents proceeded to go through their entire life savings, what they were going to retire on. And we ended up on food stamps. We ended up living in a studio with 4 of us. I ended up hungry often, and it was public school teachers who reached into their own pockets a couple of nights a week who fed me dinner. If Social Security was not there, my parents would not have had a retirement because that little bit of a government pension was not enough for my parents to retire on. And so I understand, because you can go from a place where you think you've got a 401k plan and you've got your pension and you've got everything set up. My dad had everything. He thought he'd worked since he was 14 years old, and he thought he had everything set up. And everything crumbled. It took 5 years, and that's not a very long time, and everything crumbled, and my parents had nothing. And thank God Social Security was there. That's where the people in my district are right now. We're not a wealthy district. We're at the suburbs of Chicago. We are a 2-income household to maintain a middle-class lifestyle. 2 working people. Some folks are working 3 jobs. One person's working a part-time job for health insurance, and then the other one's working a second job. And so the people in my district are very unlikely to be able to retire purely on investments. they're very unlikely to retire purely on a pension. They are going to rely on Social Security at some point. The other part of my district, as I've traveled around, because I do use a wheelchair, and because I am disabled, I have the great privilege and honor of being cared for by the American taxpayer through the Department of Veterans Affairs. And I have all of my needs met. But time and time again, as I've traveled in my district and across the country, I've had parents of children with disabilities. I've seen adults with disabilities come up to me and say, please, please, we're getting these cuts. And I want to live, and I want my daughter to live a productive life and be as productive as she can possibly be. But some of the issues that are in the programs keep her artificially poor or keep me artificially poor, and I want to go to work. And even if I only work one day a week, it's still work, and I can then have a little income to buy a little something. And so I understand those issues in that part of Social Security as well for people with disabilities. That's why these programs are so important to me. This is America's promise. Our seniors paid into this, worked hard like my dad did his entire life, putting money away. And it was there to save my dad, and it saves my mother to this day after my dad is gone. It will be there for those in the disability community to take care of them. In my race, I ran against a gentleman who called both Social Security and Medicare Ponzi schemes and was soundly rejected for it. The people of the district have made it clear. They may be on one side or the other, but on this issue, preserve the guarantees of Social Security and Medicare. And that is what I will do because it is part of my personal life. It is part of my job description as has been given to me by my district, and I simply think it is part of our value as Americans that these programs are maintained, and that'll be my priority. So I'm so proud to be here. Having Max come out, having the National Campaign to Preserve Social Security and Medicare support me was critical in the campaign. It was a hard-fought battle, and I really look forward to joining my colleagues to working on these issues, not for me, but for the people of my district, because this is their values, this is their lives, and this is what keeps them happy and productive, and this is what makes this nation strong. Thank you very much.
Well, I guess you can tell that in my book, Tammy Duckworth is a star, and I think all of America will recognize that she's a star soon. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Next, we're going to hear from Congresswoman Gwen Moore. The National Committee to Preserve Social Security and Medicare issued a report last spring on how we can improve benefits for women, Social Security benefits for women. And Congresswoman Moore jumped into the lead in developing legislative proposals that would do just that. She especially cares about providing caregiver credits to women who have to leave the workforce to care for a family member and are deprived of the full Social Security benefits that they should be getting. So she's a champion for women and for everybody that cares about Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. Thank you, Congressman.
Thank you so very, very much. You're going to have Tammy's glasses on. Okay. Well, thank you so very, very much. I want to just thank the National Committee to Preserve Social Security and Medicare for sponsoring this Blue Letter drop-off event. Just let me say that you have a lot of competition. This Blue Letter event has a lot of competition for the attention of the American people and seniors about the future insolvency of Social Security, Medicare, and just let me add Medicaid, particularly in this environment of where we're going to go off the so-called fiscal cliff. I am a member of the Committee on Budget, whose chair is currently Congressman Paul Ryan, most recently the vice presidential candidate for the presidency. We're both from Wisconsin, so I've had a close-up and personal encounter with some of his proposals around Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, which have inspired me to get in the fray, so to speak. You are in a lot of competition because Social Security has consistently been mischaracterized as being the driver of the debt. And Paul Ryan has had the bully pulpit, I would say, with regard to scaring younger people, convincing younger people that they, in fact, would never have the opportunity to have Social Security benefits that they could enjoy. They have been scared into believing that that Medicare is the major part of our budget deficit, and that nothing can be done with that except to turn it into a voucher and create these huge holes. So I've been exploring ways to really fix it. The truth is that the Social Security Trust Fund has over $2.8 trillion in surplus. It will remain solvent until 2035. So why do they want to say that it's not solvent? I guess because we didn't have that lockbox, because because they don't want to pay the Treasury. They don't want to honor the Treasury bonds that Social Security has. And they don't want to tell you about the other options for reaching some sort of relieving us of our debt and being able to honor those bonds. Like, for example, getting rid of the Bush-era tax cuts. You know, I'm just like a girl who used to be in love. I'm just so over George W. Bush. And we could get rid of almost $1 trillion, all this huge negotiation that takes all of the greatest minds in our country and all of the economists. Let's just get over George W. Bush. And if we could just allow those tax cuts for the top 2% to to expire, magically disappear on December 31st, 2012, that would bring us almost $1 trillion over the decade. What they also don't want to tell you is that the program, the Social Security, with a few tweaks, can in fact be solvent within that 75-year window. And I do have a bill that I have not yet introduced, but if you don't mind, I'd just like to tell you just a couple of highlights. Do I have time for a couple of highlights about the bill? First of all, I've got it in solvency from this moment forward to 75 years in the future. And it doesn't require an increase in retirement age. And what it requires is that we take the cap, the $106,800 cap off. And it also requires a 1/20th of 1% increase in contributions for the rest of us, and this will all be paid for. This will in fact bring it into solvency. It provides, right now we have a minimum amount of Social Security that people can get, which doesn't take seniors out of poverty. I heard Rosa DeLauro talk to you about how Social Security has taken the seniors out of poverty, but the fact is that right now the minimum amount doesn't do that. My bill would make sure that the minimum amount would be 120% of the poverty level. It would allow for caregiver credits. That is, those years that women are spending caretaking for their children could be counted as work years. It would give a 5% bump up for workers 20 years after they've become eligible for Social Security, and that's recognizing the greater needs that people have 20 years after they've retired. You know, most often they are no longer driving, they need transportation, they need someone to come in clean the house, they need people to do yard work. Expenses increase as you become older, and it would recognize that. It would also restore the student benefit for disabled workers or deceased workers whose children were still in school after the age of 18 until they finished college. I think that, you know, in a country where we're talking about the need to educate the future workforce, this was a tremendous benefit that we need to restore. And we do all that without increasing the age of Social Security. Medicare, very briefly. We have been, again, frightened into thinking that the only solution to saving Medicare is to blow a hole into it and requiring an additional, in present dollars, $6,000 a year for seniors. But let me tell you, so before we pull in all the medical analysts and everybody from Oxford and the Wharton School of Economics in on this, let's just have a very simple conversation here with the National Committee to Preserve Social Security and Medicare. Why don't we just start negotiating drug prices with the pharmaceutical companies and get that critical mass, like everybody else does, lower costs of prescription drugs? That would help a lot. You know, and I just heard the CEO of Aetna this morning on Morning Joe admitting that there's a lot of waste and abuse and fraud in Medicare, and that there are a lot of cost savings. For example, you heard a lot over the last campaign season about the $719 billion that President Obama stole out of Medicare. Well, let me tell you, you know, there were overpayments to pharmaceutical companies of 16% for that Medicare Advantage. There was 16% overpayment to that program, which the president took back and plowed back into benefits. And so I want to thank you for your Blue Letter campaign. Thank you for coming up on Capitol Hill today, because we need as many allies as we can, because the lie that Social Security and Medicare is unsustainable for future generations needs to be debunked. And you are the debunkers. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman. We need in this country to be having a conversation about the bill that Congresswoman Moore will introduce, not about cutting these important programs. And we will do whatever we can to help the Congresswoman move that bill through the process. We're going to now hear, we may have other members coming, but in the meantime, we're going to hear from Jonathan Voss with Lake Research Partners. They've done some very important polling for the National Committee that will, I think, be very revealing, and we will make sure the members of Congress receive this information as soon as we can. Jonathan, please.
I'll have to deal like this. So I get to be the one who presents the numbers now, and I also have some good numbers to share with you. But just on a personal note, I know Rosa was mentioning that she was talking to young people about the impact of Medicare and Social Security and how it might not touch upon them. I can say from my own experience, my mother had a, we're going to move this, okay. My mother had a kidney transplant when I was 13 years old, and she was only able to afford it because of Medicare and Medicaid and my stepfather's health insurance, and had she not been able to, she would have not been able to send me to college. And so I enjoy a college education because of our commitment to seniors and taking care of healthcare and taking care of those who are in need. So I have a personal vested interest in seeing these programs, obviously, for my own future, but just knowing from my own personal experience. But enough about me. Let me just get into some of the data that we have here. We conducted an election eve omnibus poll, so we looked at voters' opinions the Sunday, Monday before Election Day and Tuesday of Election Day. We spoke to 1,000 likely voters and folks who said they had voted based on landline, that we conducted via landline, and 200 interviews among those on cell phones. And we have a couple key findings that we have. Obviously, this is to no one's surprise that the economy and jobs kind of topped people's issue concerns. But in the second tier of issues, education and healthcare, Social Security and Medicare was right there alongside. And among seniors, Social Security and Medicare were strong second-tier issues behind the economy. We also asked folks how important were Medicare and Social Security in making their decision, and a 57% majority said that it was either the single most important deciding factor or a very important deciding factor into who to cast their ballot for. And President Obama carried these voters by a 15-point margin. On Social Security, voters believe that both Democrats in Congress and the president would better handle it than the issue than Republicans in Congress. On Medicare, however, Obama ran ahead of Democrats in Congress and had a larger advantage among independents and voters under 50. But for older voters, they gave Republicans in Congress an edge over Democrats. And I think there's several things that are going on here, and I'll get into that when we go into the data. However, we do see a couple very, very clear things coming out of this survey. Number one, when we looked at the kind of Democratic plan for Medicare of preserving it, keeping traditional Medicare as it is, giving seniors the option to choose their own doctors, it outperforms by more than 3 to 1 the Republican plan to voucherize Medicare. And that's something that we had seen consistently throughout the campaign when we had been looking at the Ryan plan, and just very, very crystal clear data coming out of our poll here. And then in terms of moving forward, there are two very obvious choices that the public wants to see enacted, one on Medicare and one on Social Security. And Congresswoman Moore pointed to them both very explicitly in her presentation just ago. One is raising the cap. Voters think this is a loophole. They didn't know that there was a cap on Social Security wages. And when they find out that people earning, I think what in 2013 will be $110,100, people earning more than that they're not paying Social Security taxes on that income, that's insane to them. That is a loophole that they are getting away with, and that's a loophole that must be closed. And of the changes that we looked at to the proposed changes to Social Security, this was the clear winner that voters support seeing. And then when it comes to Medicare, allowing Medicare to negotiate for lowering the cost of prescription drug prices, once again, the clear-cut winner. Anything that would reduce benefits to Medicare, anything that would reduce benefits to Social Security, voters strongly oppose those measures. But when it comes to Medicare, they want to see Medicare negotiate to lower prescription drug prices, and they want to see the cap on Social Security taxes raised. So I'll go through some of the data here. In 2008, we see a little bit of a change from 2008 in terms of the electorate, and I can get into some exit polling data at the end of this survey as well. But we won near seniors by 1 point, Obama did in 2008, and you see a 5-point swing or a 6-point swing to a net 5-point loss in this past election, and an erosion among seniors continues. And I think that part of this is there is a more, I think in our survey at least, we enjoyed a 7-point Democratic partisan ID advantage. So 40% of voters said they were identified as a Democrat, and 33% said they identified as a Republican. Among seniors, it was 4 points in the other direction. 40% said they identify as Republicans, 36% as Democrats. So we start from a position of disadvantage, and a little bit of those demographic shifts have played out in this election. Once again, the economy just tops people's. This shouldn't be a surprise to anyone who was following the election. The economy and jobs, 61% of voters cited one of those as the top issues. But you can see in that second tier, Social Security and retirement security at 12%, and Medicare and prescription drugs at 7%. That's 19% among all voters who picked one of those two issues as their top issue concern when deciding who to vote for president. Among seniors, it's more than a third at 36%, and near retirees, 24% picked one of those two issues. Then we asked separately, how important are these issues in making your decision to vote? And the dark blue here is the single most important, that 10% overall. The next to dark blue, very important, 46%. So 56% of voters said that Social Security and Medicare were at least very important in their decision of who to vote for in this election. 29% somewhat important. And you can see differences by age as well, a little bit more important for those that are older. Of the 56% who either said it's the single most or a very important issue for them, Obama won those voters by 15 points. You can see he won overall by 2 points, but among those who found Medicare and Social Security to be one of their core issues, we enjoyed a 15-point margin when it came down to deciding who to vote for. Who would better handle Social Security? On the left-hand side, you see a comparison between Republicans in Congress and Democrats in Congress. And on the right-hand side, you see the Republicans against the president. And Democrats actually ran behind the president when it came to Social Security, particularly among independent voters and also among seniors. I think part of this, again, is that partisan ID advantage that voters over 65 were trended to be more likely to be Republican. When it comes to Medicare, however, we see that among seniors, we ran behind, actually, Republicans in Congress. And I think this comes to, frankly, that $718 billion argument. And we found in our polling in September that when we compared kind of the Republican Party line that Obama is sacking Medicare by $718 billion to pay for the ACA, we found that it didn't quite work compared to what we were saying, which is it cuts waste, fraud, and abuse and actually extends Medicare by several years. But we do think that it just repetitive use of that talking point did take its toll. And although we do see, again, that the president ran ahead of independents and others. And part of this, I think, frankly, has to do with just this institution not being the most popular at the moment. And the president had a little bit more of an advantage in terms of just nationally being able to talk about some of these issues. But once again, if you look at those voters, again, this is that 56% who said that Medicare and Social Security were the single most important or very important in deciding who to vote for. You can see that they voted overwhelmingly, or they gave Democrats and they gave President Obama an overwhelming advantage when it comes to these issues. Who would better handle Social Security? 15-point net Democrats in Congress would handle better. 25 net point that President Obama would handle this issue better, and similar dynamic playing out in Medicare. So those who are most concerned about these issues do still trust Democrats. They do still trust the president to handle these issues slightly better. Here, I think, was kind of the crux of the debate going into the election on Medicare. We have in red is the Republican kind of option, changing Medicare by giving future retirees a voucher to help pay for a choice of private insurance plans. And we didn't read that as a Republican statement. We just read it as is. And in the blue, we split sample two different versions of what Democrats have been saying, keeping Medicare as we know it today for current seniors and future retirees, and protecting traditional Medicare, and keeping the choice of doctor for current seniors and future retirees. And by more than a 2-to-1 margin, you see that the Democratic position, which wasn't read as a Democratic position, just I'm calling it a Democratic statement, but our position was much, much, much stronger in the electorate. And I think that part of the reason you're not seeing some of the advantage play out in some of the numbers is I think that the Republicans did do an effective job of muddying the debate in this, even though I think that the National Committee and others were very consistent in our messaging about how their plan would raise the cost of prescription drugs and make it harder for seniors to choose their own doctor. The Republicans also, though, did invest a lot of money in trying to push their false advertising out there. Which approach to Medicare you prefer? You can see once again here, independents strongly on our side, seniors 73 to 14, a 59% gap, 59-point margin, strongly prefer the Democratic approach to keeping traditional Medicare as it is. Moving forward, and before I get into this data, I did want to share one exit polling data, which I think, there's been a lot of talk on TV right now about the president's mandate and Congressman Ryan saying that he doesn't have a mandate, that congressional Republicans are still in charge, even though if you look at the raw vote, Democrats outperformed Republicans nationally at the congressional vote, picked up 7 seats. I think there was a very clear mandate. And one of the exit polling questions that was asked is, should taxes be increased for all Americans, for those earning over $250,000, or not at all? And 60% of voters said they should be increased for all or those earning over $250,000. 47% plurality said that increasing taxes, that you should increase taxes for those earning over $250,000. Of those voters, that 47% plurality, 70% of them voted for President Obama, and just 29%, voted for Governor Romney. To me, that is a clear mandate that moving forward as these sequestration and fiscal cliff talks move forward, that there's a clear mandate to increase taxes, to let the Bush tax cuts for those earning over $250,000 expire. Getting back into Social Security and Medicare, however, there's also clear direction from the data that we see as to what voters want to see. We tested several possible changes to Social Security. Means testing for those earning $60,000 or more, reducing their Social Security benefits when they retire. 71% opposed that, 59% strongly. Raising the retirement age to 69, 67, 2/3 oppose that, 56% strongly. And it's young people who are opposed to raising the retirement age to 69, especially in an era, in a period where you've seen high rates of unemployment. If people are working until they're 69, I'm never going to get a job. So it's young people who are actually a little bit more hesitant to raise the retirement age to 69, even though it's far off in the distance for them. But what do voters overwhelmingly support? Gradually requiring employees and employers to pay Social Security taxes above, that should say above, $110,100, which they do not now. 64% of voters favor that, 55% strongly. Very clear direction on what voters want to see this body do if they're going to make any changes to Social Security. It's reducing what they see as a loophole for those earning over $110,000. And looking at this in two contexts. We asked in terms of the context of negotiating a budget to reduce the deficit and just as a generic change to Social Security. And in both cases, you see majorities across party lines, or plurality at least of Republicans there on the bottom, favor getting rid of the cap. 75% of Democrats, 63% of independents, and 54% of Republicans in the context of reducing the deficit. So as this debate unfolds in the next couple of weeks, very clear direction on what voters want to see here on Social Security. When it comes to Medicare, also clear direction. I'll start with the bottom two that voters oppose. Cutting Medicare benefits for people under the age of 55, which was part of what would have happened had the Ryan Plan been enacted. 64% oppose, 53% majority oppose that strongly. Cutting reimbursements to doctors, hospitals, and other healthcare providers who provide services to Medicare beneficiaries. 6 in 10 voters oppose that. Again, 50% plurality strongly oppose that. What do they favor? Allowing Medicare to negotiate with drug companies to bring down the cost of prescription drugs. 77% strongly favor this. This is a home run in pollster talk. You see numbers like that. I mean, any candidate running for any office across the country would love 77% of their electorate to strongly favor their candidacy. 86% in total, that's nearly 9 in 10, strongly want Medicare to negotiate with drug companies to bring down the cost of prescription drugs. So as we move forward with these budget talks, clear direction from voters coming from the exit polls that they supported Obama and they believe that that we should be increasing taxes for those earning over $250,000 a year. And if you're going to make changes to Social Security, raise the cap. If you're going to make changes to Medicare, allow Medicare to negotiate with drug companies. Very clear direction from voters in this election, and there's some very important choices to be made, and voters know exactly what they want. Oh, I still had more. This by data. This by party, this is once again cutting benefits for people under the age of 55 by party. You can see a majority there of Republicans also oppose that, 51%. And once again, allowing Medicare to negotiate off the charts across party lines. 81% of Democrats strongly favor, 86% of independent voters strongly favor this, and 7 out of 10 Republicans once again strongly favor allowing Medicare to negotiate with drug companies. I think that's my last slide. It is indeed. But across party lines, very clear direction on what voters want to see with Social Security and Medicare. And I will turn it back to Max.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. Yeah, and thank you. Jonathan just got a few hours sleep because he flew in late last night. You probably slept a couple hours before you came here.
I actually dozed on the plane.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you for. We really appreciate your work with us and coming here this morning. I also want to ask Sue Ward to stand up. Sue was with the National Committee for quite a few years, ran our grassroots operation and retired, and she's a former Secretary of Aging for the state of Maryland, former congressional candidate, the nominee of the Democratic Party for running for a congressional seat. So thank you for all you've done for the National Committee and continue to do. Thank you so much. I'm not gonna give my big speech. You heard plenty of speeches, but I wanted to tell you that on Tuesday I had the honor, and I mean it was a big honor for me, to be invited to the White House to meet with the President. I was in a group that he met with on Tuesday. There were about 8 or 9 of us, labor leaders and leaders from the progressive causes, which included the National Committee. And we met for about an hour and 15 minutes with the economic team, Secretary of the Treasury, Chair of the Council of Economic Advisors, Valerie Jarrett, close advisor to the President, and with the Vice President. And we went around the room a few times. Each of us got to speak. And the last opportunity I had, I made the strongest statement I could about Social Security not being part of this discussion. And I know some of the members of Congress mentioned it, but I think it's very important that the White House and the House and the Senate understand that Social Security, as Javier went through the numbers so accurately, is not in bankruptcy, is not in crisis. There are things that can be done over the course of many years to make sure it is around for many more years. But it is not in a situation where we have to take any drastic action, and is not a program that needs to be cut in any way. And Social Security has not contributed to our federal debt, not a penny. And it should not be part of the discussion. And I think that the President agreed with us. And that's a big deal. It's a very big deal for him to acknowledge that. So he also said, in response to my position, that whatever happens with Social Security would be on a separate track, not part of any deficit negotiations, and that the White House would be in consultation with the National Committee to preserve Social Security and Medicare. So we got our foot in the door, and we're going to keep trying to move forward. I want to thank everybody for coming. I want to thank Senator Harkin's aide for being here. I guess we'll see him later this afternoon. And all of you, all of our volunteers, you're always there. Thank you so much.